Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar. Thank you all for being here and joining us today. We have an exciting session ahead, filled with insight and discussion about DDD and legacy code with our friend Khaled. We are thrilled to have our esteemed speaker with us today. Thank you again, Khaled, to be here. You will be able to share your expertise and experience with us about DDD and legacy code and how to tame legacy code with DDD. During with this webinar, we encourage active participation and interaction. So feel free to ask any question directly in the chat, not really in the question part, but directly in the chat during the session. So then I will ask them directly to Khaled during the discussion. So it will be more interactive this way. So for my part, I'm Arthur Magne, CTO and co-founder of Promise. We create IDE and code review plugins for GitLab, GitHub, Azure DevOps, or Bitbucket that helps developers to share their best practices and knowledge about testing, security, or architecture, refactoring, etc. So I can send in the chat, maybe Cedric will send it up, some links if you want to discover more about Promise, or if you want to try it yourself. We have a freemium version, so if you want to try it within your team, you can directly create an account on our SaaS version. And also you can download the on-premise version. It's something that you can launch with Docker or an N# or whatever. And you can use it directly in your company without any external access. So Khaled, thank you again for being here. Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So Khaled Souf. I'm actually, let's say, I'm a consultant in tech industry. So I do a lot of things. I'm trainer for the best practices, development best practices like DDD, like stream programming. And also I'm the CTO of a small company in Switzerland who is called Socradev. Well, I worked mainly in I lived in like 4 countries. I worked with many companies, many different culture. I was very active in the community in Paris, the software crafters community in Paris. I also was one of the co-organizer of the community in Montreal. Right now, I'm also co-organizing the meetup in Switzerland, Romandy. And that's all.
That's really good so far. So can you tell us, how do you start when you start a coaching or a mentoring for a new company with a lot of legacy code? I think it's the case of a lot of companies today, and especially in large companies. And how can you push some concept about DDD when there is a lot of legacy code?
Okay, so the first thing is actually, if the legacy is there, there is a reason. The first reason that I've seen is like when the company is working in what we call a project mode. So it's like when they need to do something, they pay for it. And then at some point, they're going to reduce the people that going to stay and maintain it. Like they start with 4 people and then they reduce it to 1 people. That creates actually a lot of legacy. And this is one of the reasons that we have the legacy. The other reason is actually we have so much turnover on that application. So everybody comes with his own practices, own way of writing code. And you're going to find, let's say, multiple different styles of coding. And that's really actually very weird, especially for somebody who is joining. He doesn't have some kind of mapping. He can map the code or he can understand the intention because there is a multiple intention. It's like you are in the room and there is everybody is speaking, so you don't hear anything because everybody is speaking about something different. So at some point you need to isolate these things and try to understand every one of them, exactly the message that you have. So this is the why. Why do we have a legacy? So it can be something related to the budget, to the strategy of the company. And also, I don't mean to be, but in some companies, actually, the software itself is actually something secondary. It's like a cost, let's say, center is not really something that is bringing value. So that's why people manage it in a project mode, let's say it that way. So how do we deal with that? The first thing is actually you need to understand what is the value that the code brings. So that's why we need DDD to do it. So we need to understand what is the value, what are the issue or the problem that the code resolves before getting deeper in that. Because when you understand the message, you can understand every feature, what it should actually doing right now. And usually, that's why I start with event storming. Event storming is going to be very helpful for that because you're going to understand all the flow, all the persona, every profile of user, how gonna manipulate or use the application itself. That is one of the first thing that usually I do to try to understand what the legacy actually code is doing. And you have another part that what I call is actually what it should be doing, because it's completely different between what the legacy code is doing right now and what are the needs of the customer. So it's like what the application should be doing. How I do that? Actually, I remember that like 7 or 8 years ago, I've been working in a big company, big financial company. And I've worked actually with Cyril Martrell, who is actually one of the biggest figure in domain-driven design community. And what he actually did in that is like he always say that to understand that part, the part that what the company needs, I need to discard completely the legacy code and try to understand the interaction between people using some kind of paper that is going to be, switching hand between people. At that time, domain storytelling doesn't exist yet. Now we have domain storytelling who is actually doing that. So it's like you need these two vision. Event storming is actually focusing more on processing, on the, let's say, the user journey. And domain storytelling is actually focusing more on interaction between the systems, between the people. So why do you need that? Because at that point, it can be very, very helpful to understand if you're gonna continue with your legacy code, or maybe you need to create another application and completely discard it. It's very important business-wise decision to have these kind of, let's say, indicators to take decision, or let's say decision helpers. So let's go with the idea that we're going to continue with the legacy code, because if we stop right here, we're going to stop, the webinar. So actually what I do is, like, after I get that, I try to try to get some main cases scenarios, like main case user scenarios or user flow. And from there, we start to create approval tests for our application. Why are we testing that in that way? Approval test is actually very interesting in this way, because you have your big chunk of legacy. You're going to have some kind of input and output. So it's like you can be sure that you covered like 80% of the functionality of the features using approval testing. And the biggest indicator is actually the scenario that you already detected with DDD. So you will not have 100%, let's be realistic. You can't cover everything, but you're gonna try to minimize as much as possible any negative impact to your legacy when you are working on the code.
So it's like for refactoring. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
you start by creating
Refactoring,
the test.
yes, refactoring. It can be also maybe adding some small feature, changing feature, something like that. So you can be sure when you have this kind of test, what we call approval tests, that the input and the output, you know that they will not change because you already have that in most of the case. Let's be clear, but sometimes you're gonna miss one or two edge cases because here we are dealing with lost knowledge. We are not dealing with creating knowledge. We are not trying to understand the business. We are trying to understand what the code actually is doing, base it on the business. The other thing is also when you do that, you can go to a part, deep dive on it, and if you have, let's say, that kind of part gonna do the feature, you can start try to extract, to isolate, and try to refactor that part to make it more, let's say, more readable and more maintainable. This is mostly what I do to get all through that. But there is something else also I do when I'm not really confident about what I extract from the business in DDD side. What I try to do, I do the thing other way around. Is like I try to log all the output that the application is giving depending on the input. And from there, I do some kind of reverse engineering to try to understand the, let's say, the flows or the journey of the user from that. Sometimes I do it the other way around. So it's like I'm going to construct all the interaction between users and all the flow using event storming, base it on the code.
Okay. Is it the case when you don't have access to business people and you can't speak with them and understand all the
Yeah.
business logic you want to add in the
Yes.
application?
Usually you don't find anyone accessible that know the business and that know that what the application should do. So it's like completely lost. It can be because these people, they are not there anymore. And it can be also political because they are in different departments. So it's very hard to get them for many reasons. And yeah, so usually are the kind of reasons that you're gonna find. And in this case, it's very, very complicated to deal with legacy because you're dealing with another complexity who is actually, you don't know, you don't have the knowledge and you don't know where you can get that knowledge. So you need to reconstruct it using some kind of reverse engineering.
So in fact, you do what the team should have done at the beginning of the project. So it's really event storming to understand how the business work and how the logic should be handled. And then the idea of DDD, if you can remember us, is really to push and to put those business logic and those business knowledge directly within the code, so that the code himself and the architecture reflect how the business should work.
Exactly. So the thing is, that's the case, but also what you can do actually as a delivery, let's say, when you go through that using both of the methods, you're gonna create some kind of actually you're gonna recreate the specification of the project or of the product. So it's like you're gonna recreate all the scenarios of the users. So when you get that, you have also to make a choice at that point. You can even recreate all the application because you already have the scenario, or you can say, okay, we don't have the budget, so let's go, let's push them and create some kind of test based on them, so we can be refactoring or cleaning our code, let's say, with some kind of serenity when we do it.
So you try to start with extracting this business logic and create some specification, put those specification as a test within the code, and then extract some part of the component directly in his own domain. And then do you train the team for those concepts of DDD, like value
Yes.
object, etc.?
Exactly. Actually, from there is actually we do some kind of, when you deep dive inside an application, the first thing that we're gonna do is like, there is two things. We're gonna create something that is gonna validate that the code that we can't do less test than before. So it's like if you have let's say 20% of code coverage, that's the case usually in legacy, we're gonna try to let's say to make it more than that, but we will not tolerate that it's gonna be lesser than that. So it's like if somebody is refactoring and he's creating some classes and all the stuff, but didn't add tests or maybe removed some tests, we will not accept it. So that's the main point of actually to create these kind of gatekeepers. Sometimes some people don't like them, but we need to do that. The other gatekeeper that I usually use is like using some kind of test to validate, let's say if we structure part and then we create some kind of new architecture, we're gonna create some kind of validation for the automatic validation for that architecture. So we can be sure that when somebody is actually adding code to the new, let's say, part or to the extracted part, we can be sure that that part gonna be and gonna still reflecting the architecture that we have in mind as a team. It's not only myself, we decide that, we decided as a team, and we create these kind of gatekeepers. So it's like that part is like heaven, but in the same time is like it should be we stay strict as much as possible about the quality on that part, about testing, about design, about architecture, and we try to keep it as these gatekeepers as automatic as possible. The other thing also, code reviews with people, very, very helpful, because when somebody discovers something, he needs to share it with all the team. And usually when you are working in people who are dealing with legacy code, like I said, the knowledge is actually lost. So when they go there and do some kind of mob or ensemble programming, it's going to be very helpful to share that business knowledge between people.
And how do you do that? So you spoke about code reviews, but do you push some other things like pair programming, mob programming, some communities of practices? Do you work with one team or multiple teams, and how do you handle this complexity?
Well, always it's actually linked to the budget that the team they have. And usually I ask that they have like 1 day in a week or maybe half a day in a week to do that. So we can get together and we only do cleanup and refactoring for that. The issue is actually because they have so much pressure, so they are adding to the legacy more legacy. And when you have that part, is like you ask them about what are the most painful point that they have, and from there you can let's say create every week a subject that they're gonna treat in that session. And I'm gonna be, usually I do only the facilitator. I try to understand the business, but if I'm not very helpful, I'm gonna try to be the facilitator. And from there, I'm gonna try to push some kind of design patterns, best practices. It's a session about sharing knowledge and in the same time learning the best practices, and try to let's say to broadcast that to all the team or to most of the team. What is actually also very complicated when you have a big base of code legacy that are, let's say, used by multiple teams. And you know that at some point there is, you can't have the same knowledge about the practice. Let's say it can be the same knowledge of these best practice for all the team, because you can do them in the same, in the same session. So you're gonna try to repeat yourself in multiple sessions, and that can create really, let's say, something that is very frustrating, especially for the people that started learning these things, and then the other team has modified the code, and and usually reviews, they use we use reviews inside the same team, but not outside the team. So it's like, usually you don't have the cross, let's say, I call it the cross review between teams. So that's also a very big issue. And what we try to do in that case is actually trying to create some kind of an ambassador about that class, about something, and try to inform the other people. If somebody need to push something on that, he need to refer to that person, because that person already have the knowledge about the best practice. So he gonna be the reviewer for that class for, like, it can be for weeks, for a month or something. So it's like we create some kind of, let's say, ownership, small ownership for every team. So you can be sure that after that, everybody understand the knowledge that is there. Also get to know the knowledge, get the knowledge from the other team that his team doesn't have. Also, something else, when you see a legacy code, usually there is a problem with the organization itself. You're going to have one person who knows everything, and the others, they are only trying to support that person. And that's also a very bad, let's say, practice on knowledge sharing. We need to have some kind of collective ownership, like in extreme programming. Because if that person is actually not there, well, we already creating legacy when we have only one person who knows that. So it's like, if that person go elsewhere, we immediately we have a bigger issue. We have a legacy on that. So what we need to do in that case is actually remove the keyboard from that person, and he's gonna try to mob program for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, with all the members of the team, trying to tell them what to do. And in the same time, they need to ask him about why they are doing that way, why they should do it. Maybe they can do it differently. So it's like, it's gonna create some kind of interaction. And in the same time, he's gonna be more relaxed when he is working, because usually it creates very frustrating environment, especially for that person. That's what we call actually the hero syndrome or something like that. And
it's something that we are working with at least every day with Promise. We try to tell the technical leaders and the person with the most knowledge about something, some precise thing. The first habit that they need to have is really to share this knowledge with others, and to capitalize on that knowledge. So with plugin like Promise, you can just identify some part of the code within your IDE or during a code review session, and you can say, okay, this is a good practice to, I don't know, to log errors this way, or to use this kind of interaction between those components, etc. Or just something about how you should use hexagonal architecture, where you should put the infrastructure part, etc. And it's really something really hard for the different teams. Not really the technical part of how you should do something, but more the communication across a team and across different teams. How you should push every knowledge that you get from one team to another, and to the newcomer joining the team. If you have some turnover within your organization, it's really something important to push all of your best practices, all of what you can push to the team, Khaled, directly to a newcomer, because otherwise you will have some regression within the code. So someone who will not follow the rules that you made, and someone else we say, okay, if everyone doesn't care about how we should handle the architecture, I will do the same. And this is some other effect, something which is explained in the Pragmatic Programmer, a notebook, but it explains very well this case, the broken glass issue. When you have a broken glass within a building, if you leave it this way, in a few weeks you will have more broken glass, and it will be a real issue. And it's really the same within the code. You need to ensure that everyone within the team and across the different teams have the same vision, the global vision of the quality of this project, and why you shouldn't go back to the legacy code that you have. So how do you prevent those kind of regression? Do you have some insight of some experience about it?
Well, yeah, actually, like you said, the broken window is actually a very good analogy about that. The thing is actually, like I said, if you create gatekeepers, especially automatic one, you're gonna be sure that they're gonna keep some kind of, let's say, some kind of quality on that. The other thing is actually, I've done it with other teams. Gamification can be very helpful in this case. So usually it's like if somebody is adding tests, you're gonna get some points, and it's gonna be like a game, and the people they're gonna be more motivated. That's for sure. And the people they're gonna try, like it's gonna be some kind of competition. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna create a test. I know that I'm gonna get some point. I'm gonna try to cover as much as possible. Making also people work together using pair programming is gonna be very helpful, because usually when you are alone, you're gonna be, let's say, more relaxed about that. It's like, okay, I didn't create the test. That's okay. That's fine. I'm gonna push it that way. If somebody says something, I will say that I forgot about it, or maybe I don't care about the test. But if there are two people, one of them gonna be playing the role of, hey, you shouldn't do that. Maybe we should add the test, and that's okay. We're gonna do it together. And it's like it creates some kind of sense of responsibility. In the same time, there are two people, so it's like I'm not alone, so I can do it. There is something that we call that when you have a group of people that they're gonna try to let's say to do something very, very crazy. If somebody try to do it alone, he's gonna be like, okay, I will not do it. I'm fearing that. But if there is mostly there is a group of people, they are working on that and trying to do that, he say, okay, I'm not alone. I'm sure that my team having my back, or maybe my let's say my co-pilot or something gonna have my back. So I'm gonna do it, and we are sharing the responsibility. I'm gonna have the courage to do it. And that's what actually what I hate about legacy. It's like create some kind of sense of fear, and we need to remove that, so the people have the courage to do things, to refactor, to clean up. And that's also the kind of thing that should be, we create some kind of safe environment for people to do it. So we need a safe environment. We need also some kind of investment on that. So it's like time and money. So when we are speaking about time, we're speaking about money. And also the business side need to understand that when we are creating a new feature, or when we are trying to fixing stuff, actually it's gonna take more time, because when we are trying to clean up the mess that have been there before.
And is it easy to explain this to the business people? Do you have some
Well,
tips?
depending on the context. So usually it's not easy, because they don't understand. But what I'm trying to do is like, I'm always use some kind of analogy to explain to them. So it's like I say, okay, so now we are eating, we have multiple plates, and we need to clean up the plates. In the legacy code is actually we are keeping the plates, we are not cleaning them. But at some point, I'm gonna need the small plate that's, you know, at the bottom. So I need to clean all the plates to get to that bottom. So that's why we need to clean them every day, so we can be sure that we have some kind of minimum quality about that. So this is how I actually, let's say, include them in that. So I try to always to say, okay, for you have a sprint. So in that sprint, I think we should take like a day off or maybe 2 days, depending how much budget they have. These 2 days are actually, or these days, or this small amount of time are used to the team to do refactoring, more programming and something. And at some point, when you do that for a year or two, you're gonna see the results, because it's gonna be, you are investing on something. You're not doing something, you know, one time and that's all. No, you are creating that, what I call that engine or that machine that is gonna clean up everything. And I think that's the best practice to have. One of the things that I remember is actually, if you see the DORA research group, that is actually some kind of organism that was created by Google or by multiple people. I remember that they do a survey every 2 years across the world by developers, for developers. So I don't remember what year is actually the report, but I remember that they've done a report or what the developer, how they manage their time when they are working. And surprisingly, the most high performance companies, their developers, they use only 50% of their time to create a new feature. The other time is actually they have 5% to resolve security issues. They have 15% resolving bug and refactoring, both of them. And they have like, the other time is actually use it to understand the business. So if somebody is passing, let's say 80% or 90% of his time only creating feature, there is already, there is already a legacy coming after that. That's for sure. Why? Because they don't take the time to resolve this issue day to day. And that's the best way
that's
to
really
do it.
interesting. Yes, I didn't have this in mind. This part of the analysis that did the DORA research team. It's really interesting because we know that if you take too much time only adding new code and not caring about the old one, it's really an issue. But what is really interesting about the DORA research team is that they did this research on thousands of people and thousands of companies. So you can say that to your manager or to someone who didn't know about technical issues, and say, okay, you don't have to be against that, because this is the industry, this is the reality. So you can say that it's not something in our case that will be working, because the industry proved that you should act like this to be better and to be part of the most performing teams. So it's really interesting to help us understand what to do and to help us convince other people who didn't know what to do. We have some question, a question of from Rose. After your experience, how much time can it take to recover this debt and switch to DDD within the company, in best and worst cases? Because I think that it will be different depending on the context.
Well, actually, depends on how much time they're gonna invest on it. So it's like if it is a legacy that have been created for more than, let's say, 10 years, and you schedule a day for that, let's say, mob session, and we create these kind of stuff, it's gonna take like, let's say, more than 3 years to get it done.
Oh, yeah.
but you're gonna already start seeing result in the first year. And it can be even more if they don't keep up with the same practice that already have been implemented.
Yeah, so it could take a lot of time,
Yeah.
but you have to keep going. You can't just stop this process after 1 year, because otherwise you will go back to your state with the legacy base, and eventually you will have to restart it from scratch, and then I think it will cost the most for the company, or maybe destroy the company if the company is really
Yeah.
relating on one software. Some company, for example, like Cdiscount in France, if you have your website which can't evolve and you have to restart it from scratch, it will be a disaster for the company. So it's really interesting to invest and to not see that as a cost, but more as an investment for the future.
Exactly. And also another thing about the question that we received, um, they need also to reduce as much as possible, let's say, turnover, because every piece of knowledge that is lost is going to be very, very complicated to get it back. So they need to keep the team stable. I will say something that maybe some people they will not agree with that, but if we are thinking about the company and the legacy code, we're gonna need to pay these people more than the average market. So we can be sure that they don't leave the company, they can stay there, and they can continue to let's say to reduce that impact. Another thing is actually you need to be very careful about the profile of developers that you have. What I'm trying to say is like if the people that you are working with, they are not striving to let's say to improve this kind of thing, I think you're gonna need to recheck how you get people. Some people they are very very competent what they are doing, but they are, let's say, they lack soft skill to communicate with other developers. That's also a big issue. I prefer somebody who is thriving to learn, and maybe he's like he just got his let's say his first job, than somebody who have more than 15 years but he's a perfect jerk, let's say it that way. Because that kind of toxic environment, they're going to influence the code itself. Some people they will they will say, okay, I don't care about that, there is already somebody who is doing that, and it's going to create more and more of legacy code. So it's very important that the team is actually in the same page, and if you have multiple teams, they're going to be in the same page too.
Yeah, I totally agree. This is what we say to companies too. Like you, the best characteristic of a good developer is communication. Is it's this soft skills to help the other and to ask question from the other. To ask the other every time you are blocking for with some issue or something that you don't know. You can just try to find it yourself and just keep the answer to you. You have to ask the other, and if no one know the answer, you have to find it yourself, and then you have to spread it to your team and across the different teams, and you have to capitalize on that knowledge that you get every day, because every day the architecture may change. You have every years some new framework joining our world, so you really have to learn something new every week. And the best way to do this is to learn from the other of your company and to help them to know what you've learned from outside of your company. So it's really interesting because this knowledge is really moving. It's like when you speak about living documentation. In this case, it's
Yeah.
really a living knowledge, something that will change within your company every day, every month. So it's really interesting to capitalize on that, to save it, to validate it, and then to spread it across your team. you can use Promise for that. It's the perfect tool. Don't use Wiki like Notion or Confluence. It's not it's not really adapted to that. But yeah, it's really something important. We have another question from Rose. What is your recommendation on this time given to cleaning? I think it's really a good question because
Yeah.
it's really hard to know what is the time slot you need to get to your team. All day a little, all days a little. Each time it looks necessary, dedicated period of time. Yeah, like we
Okay.
saw some companies making some sprint dedicated to best coding practices and to clean up. I don't think personally this is good. Like a day or a week per year when you have everyone cleaning something. We have an experience with a company in France which have implemented that. So 1 week per year has been dedicated to cleaning technical debt. And the effect of that is that I think about 2 years after then they tried that, everyone in the company um, took some holidays during that week. So this week has been a disaster, and I think they had 30% of the people only during this week because the other
Okay.
part was leaving.
That's a very good thing that you said, because actually, let's say you try to go to the gym and you try to be in a good shape. Is it better to go 1 day in a week, taking 8 hours, or maybe do an hour and a half every day? Was it easier as an engagement and also as your time that you're going to take? I think it's going to be easier to do a small step every day than taking taking a day to get that result in the gym. It's the same for the code. So it's like the best way to do it, in my opinion, every time you have a new feature, you're going to try to analyze if you can do even a small refactoring in that time, and you're going to include it in your estimate. So when somebody asks you to fix a bug, you say, okay, I'm going to fix the bug, but instead of taking a day, I know that it's going to take me a day, I will take 2 days, and I'm going to clean up that code before. So it can be also easier for the next person to fix a bug on that side. It's going to be easier for them to take that. Or maybe I can only add a test, so you can be sure that I fixed that bug. So I'm adding a test. Maybe I didn't have the time to clean it for other reason. Here, actually, I use the Boy's Code rule. I have 2 hours. What can I do for 2 hours to help myself, to help, let's say, to make it better, to make it cleaner as a code? So going back to the question that we have from Rose, if you have a sprint of 2 weeks, I'm going to say you take a day. If you have a sprint of like a week, it's going to be half a day for more programming. And you're going to try to make people pair as much as possible when they are trying to get feature or fixing bug. And also try to include in these bugs, in these like features, the time that you're going to need to add test and do refactoring. If you do that, it's going to take you so much less time. Also, something else, something that I've seen in so many teams, when they try to estimate something, they only estimate the time that they're going to take to add the new feature or to add the new bugs. They will not add the time of that it should be included, because actually it's part of the system, the refactoring, and also the test for that. I hope
Sure.
I answered your question, Rose.
I have a question myself. What are the steps that you implement to push all of this knowledge to the team? Then you spoke about test. So testing is really hard. You have multiple kind of tests. You spoke about refactoring, you spoke about DDD, so maybe hexagonal architecture, different concept on directly on DDD. So what is your recommendation? What are the first step and the others?
So basically, the first step is actually getting the same level of theoretical knowledge.
Okay.
So it's like they're going to be something that is completely outside of their scope, like, I don't know, exposing an architecture, showing what is actually hexagonal architecture, explaining what it is, try to get feedback from them to understand that if they understand what is the means for that, where they should be used, how it should be used. And then from there, when they get that theoretical knowledge, the same also for testing techniques like TDD and others, we're going to use katas, we're going to use coding dojos to do it. And then from there, I'm going to switch to more of, let's say, I'm going to be more included in the team. So what I do is like I pair program with them daily. So it's like every day I take somebody for his task. We're gonna work together. And the same also for more programming. And when I see that practical knowledge, it's used, it's very good. So I'm gonna switch, like we say, when you are coaching, you're gonna switch between three roles. You are the coach, you are the consultant, and you are maybe something else. I don't remember the third one. So I switch usually as a consultant role. So it's like I'm gonna go deep dive in their code and try to make with them a testing strategy, because that's very important when you try to do TDD. How they're gonna test, how the architecture is gonna be the newer one, how do we isolate that code so we can be sure that will not be polluted by the others. And if the code is cleaned up, where should we moving it? And if somebody is having question, usually what I'm trying to do is like not answering them. I'm gonna try to get to the team and ask the team to try to figure it out where it should be. And then if I see that it can be in a better place, then I'm gonna try to tell them, hey, I think it should be there. And sometimes in that kind of, let's say, conversation, if I'm wrong, so actually the team is in a very good, let's say, way to clean up their legacy code, because I know that they have more knowledge than me about the legacy code. They understand the context, and in the same time, they're gonna surpass me on that side, because they're already mastering the techniques that I already know, but they have the knowledge because they've been working on that more time than me. So that's a good stuff to say, okay, maybe it's time to let them go and go see another team. And then I go back after, let's say, 2 or 3 sprints to see if everything is okay. So the idea actually when I'm coaching is like, when it's like if they don't need me anymore, so I've done a very good job. So it's like they already, they created that machine in their side. And that machine is actually that what I call actually the continuous improvement machine, or the continuous improvement, let's say, engine. Even if they don't have the best of the best practices, they're already doing a good job, because they created that feedback loop, that thing that gonna clean up the mess that are there in the code without any issue. It's gonna take some time, but they need to be resilient and to keep performing well, and to keep striving to get things better.
Okay, so it's really interesting. And we have another question from Rose, more specific about the testing part, because we could have a full webinar and a full month of training just about testing. So in this case, the question is, what kind of test do you write first when you came to a team dealing with legacy high-level test? It's really a good question, because it's really something that you should use.
I actually give a part of the answer before. So it's like I'm going to use approval testing. but also I'm going to use it on only high level tests, especially when the architecture is in a mess. But if the architecture is like something that is, let's say, it is clean or it is understandable and we have very defined layers and we have some kind of isolation, so I'm going to go with the layers.
Okay. So you
But
don't start
always,
with you
yes,
don't start with unit tests only because
never. When we are working in legacy, you don't know actually that if that kind of unit is actually doing what it is expected to do. Because if you understand that piece of code, let's say, very well, that code is not a legacy anymore.
It's really
Usually you're going
interesting.
to have multiple responsibilities, something that shouldn't be there that is outside. Maybe sometimes the code is not really understandable. You create you have some kind of calling between classes or between methods or between, let's say, that are really like web, like web. So it's like very complicated to have it. So that's why the easiest way, okay, I'm going to take that system as a whole and I'm going to give an input and get the output. And the approval test is really very good for doing that. And then when I'm isolating a part, I already isolating a part, then I can do, let's say, smaller test or maybe a unit test. I will not use them as the first thing to do in a legacy. That's for sure.
Okay. And do you push some best practice about TDD? We have another webinar coming in, I think, 1 month, and we will speak with Valentina Kupak about TDD in legacy code, and we will speak about hexagonal architecture first, and at the end of the process, the TDD part. And do you push some insight about TDD or not?
Well, actually, I remember, let's say 5 or 6 years ago, I've been in auditing a company that they have a legacy, and I've been with one of my friends who is actually in Bordeaux, where you live. He's called Xavier Detan. And actually, what we did is actually we discovered what we call test, commit, and revert, and we tried to use it in legacy code. Actually, it's very good technique to use it because it's let's say it's restrict you, because if you do something that is messy, you need to revert at some point. And that's a very good thing to say and to do. When you try to use TDD, you're gonna be in legacy code. You need to be more stricter than ever, more strict than when you are creating a new code. That's the thing that you need to do. And like I said, you need to understand exactly that piece of code, what is actually doing. So to understand if that piece of code is doing what it should be doing, there is few techniques that you can find in the book of Michael Feathers, Working Effectively with Legacy Code. One of them is actually, let's say, lean to the compiler. What I actually do is like I create some kind of experimental branch. I'm trying to move the code. I'm trying to running some tests. And if it breaks, I'm going to try to understand why it breaks. And when I finished everything that I needed to do, I revert to I revert to initial state. So without testing or everything, it's only for me and myself to understand if that piece of code is really doing what it should be doing. So it's like I'm moving code, I'm playing with code without test, without any protection, but in the same time, I know that I'm gonna revert to the prior step after I finish.
Okay. So it's really interesting. And I was with Xavier Detan at the time. He discovered test commit and reverse. We were in Paris this time, and he spoke about this practice in Agile, the Agile tour at Bordeaux. I think a few years after that, and it was really interesting for everyone. And it's really um, um, is really strange to work this way, because if you make a mistake, you just revert all your work. So it's really interesting to help you to understand better what you are doing. And we will reach the end of the webinar in a few minutes, but we have a question from Anas, and this question, I think, will resume and go through everything you said. So it's really a good question to end this webinar. Can we say these steps are in order to deal with legacy code? First of all, understand the business and make sure everyone has the same understanding of the business. Then testing new code. Push to add tests in your sprint effort for odd feature. And refactor so the business logic become less dependent on framework. What do you think about it? You have this question in the chat if you want to read
Okay,
it, Khaled.
the chat. Okay. Yeah, that's almost, let's say, the steps that I'm doing. So it's like being more restrictive on the new code. And also something is like the new code should be isolated. That's the step that I'm gonna add before the testing new code. So if I have something new, I'm gonna put it in a new place. I will not put it with the others. So it will not be polluted by the others. And when I have something that I'm sure that is cleaned up and already clean it, I'm gonna move it outside from that place. It's like saying, okay, this thing is cleaned, so we're gonna move it to another place. It shouldn't be staying with the others. And then from there you can have also some kind of, okay, how much, let's say, how much of the code need to be cleaned, and how much do I have, did I clean? So it's like, finish it cleaning and moving it, and it can give you some kind of, let's say, some kind of, okay, we are moving, so that's okay, that's very good. I already have some kind of state, let's say, of the legacy code in that way.
So
And
yes, you want to add something?
for the last one, he said refactor so the business logic become less dependent on the framework. Yes, for sure, and that's actually what the hexagonal architecture is doing.
Okay, that's the same in the front end part with clean architecture, maybe. When you,
Exactly.
yeah,
It's the same for the front end part.
Yeah, I think it's really a good idea to try, like you said, to isolate this new code and to be less dependent on the framework. I think that a lot of companies have some issue with legacy code because they are too much depending on the framework or the ORM that they are using. And if they want to move something and to move to another system, it's really complicated because all of this business logic, like you said, is really restricted, really restricted by this framework. Is really into this framework. So the one thing which is really important is really this isolation, and this is something pushed by the hexagonal architecture to separate those different layers: the business logic, the infrastructure part, the user interface part, etc. So that's really something really helpful to move on from one legacy code to a good code, maintainable code. So thank you, Khaled. We are at the end of this webinar. Thank you for all of your insight and all of this knowledge. If someone want to speak with you or to know more about you, how can them reach you?
Yeah, sure. So thank you for having me today. And if you want to reach me, you have my website, which is actually khaledsouf.com, or maybe the easiest way is actually LinkedIn. But refrain from doing it in LinkedIn if you, let's say, I'm always, solicited by some kind of business developer or something about if it is not a question, there is a good thing that usually I don't answer. So if you are asking about very technical stuff and you don't have any ulterior motivation on that, I will answer the question.
That's really good. Thank you again for all of you, this experience that you shared with us. And thank you, everyone. See you next time. And have a great day, Khaled.
Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.